My general approach is to buy the worst example of the coolest cars that I can find. And I love that because it gives me license to not worry about anything. And so very infrequently do I end up buying a nice car. I sort of by accident bought a nice R8 this year because all of the terrible ones were overpriced. And 3 months ago, I bought the nicest car that I've ever purchased. And it was a 2009 Spyker C8 Laviolette that I bought from Missy Elliott. Now, Missy Elliott is quite the car enthusiast, has an amazing collection of cars, and she bought brand new this Spyker. And when I bought the car, it was totally blind. I knew that it didn't run, but I knew that was probably just electrical because the car had been sitting for 5 years. She had no idea how many miles were on it. She wasn't going to go down there and see it. It had been in a house that she hadn't been at in a while, and she just didn't know. She did have the title in hand, and so I knew that there could be untold mechanical reconditioning, but generally I thought that the car was going to be pretty nice cosmetically. It hadn't been driven all that much. To my knowledge, it hadn't been crashed or anything like that. So I thought, you know what, this is probably safe. But I gave him a very safe number that if the car was even decent, was going to give me a six-figure upside. And so I buy the car, and I have John Tamarian's team from Curated go and pick the car up because I was out doing Gold Rush. So this was in June. Now we're in October. I worked on a deal that would have required that I traded that car to buy a Bugatti Veyron Supersport, and several aspects of that deal did not work out, including ultimately the availability of the Bugatti from the seller. And so while that's still a bucket list car, the Spyker absolutely was. And over the first, 6 weeks that I owned it, I happened to be in Miami twice, and I went over to Curated and I saw the car, and it looked gorgeous. Now, when I say that a car looks gorgeous, that's very different than if, say, Rich Light from Glossit says so. Now, Rich and Glossit are a sponsor again this year for VINwiki, and we've talked a lot about their DIY ceramic coatings. We've offered special deals and things like that. And one of the things that we talked about was wanting to do another project car, because last year when I bought Paris Hilton's old SLR, I had the car shipped because it was in LA, stop in Vegas at Rich's shop, let him and his team go through the car, and then it came to me looking wonderful. I actually never saw it in its worst condition, which when I bought it at this Manheim auction, it was in. And he told me a little bit, but I just saw that the car looked amazing. And that was a great series of videos. People loved that car. I took it on Gold Rush. We had a lot of fun with it. I ended up selling it to a guy in Bulgaria at a massive profit, and everybody's happy. So this year, the cars that I had bought really didn't make sense for the projects that we had thought about doing, because either it was like the matte black LP640 Roadster or the rebuilt Title SV, and they were all just in different parts of being repaired and being broken and not being driven or being driven too much, and it was just nothing made sense. But the Spyker seemed perfect. Now, I don't like black cars because I don't like cleaning my cars. My idea of detailing a car is pulling it outside, using my Obsessed Garage pressure washer, spray it as fast as I can, jump in, and then drive as fast as I can to dry it off. And that's what a clean car is to Ed. Now, Rich doesn't think of it that way. He is the upper end of Concours level detailing and reconditioning. Now, I didn't think of this car as needing reconditioning. In fact, it wasn't until the second time that I saw the car that I even noticed that part of the nose had been repainted at some point. I did some research and I heard that she actually bumped into something. It wasn't that big of a deal, but there is a little bit of a blend line there. And so I thought that was really the extent of hard work that might be required on this car, but I knew a Spyker is an interesting car. So the idea of him assembling a team from around the country of people who had attended his Glossit University and become these Evo Pro installers that were capable of all the different things that are required for a full comprehensive paint correction, coating, all the detailing things. And so I don't know how to do that. This car I didn't really think needed it. So he started asking me to send him videos. And I was sending him little clips on my phone that showed like, oh, the car's black over red. It's got some swirl marks and things like that. And again, I don't like black cars because I don't like having to clean them. So but this one looked pretty nice. But as he starts seeing these videos, he's like, Ed, this is going to be a lot of work, and we've only set aside 2 days to do it. And I was like, what do you mean? I mean, the car doesn't have a dent in it or anything like that. When I think of hard to clean cars, like they're still in a swamp. So Rich shows up with 7 people. A couple of them were actually local. We had Devin from down in Valdosta. We had Bam from down by the airport near Hartsfield. And we had a team from Tango Mike's Detail Shop up in Virginia, Gabby and Tank. And Rich and his wife were here to help as well. So when I think about getting a car in drivable condition, honestly, most of my cars I could never make worse. Like, they're in such bad shape. They've been spray painted or crashed terribly and painted poorly that all I can do is put miles on the car, prove that it works, and it'd be better. That's not exactly the same goal when you become the steward of one of the lowest mile C8 Laviolettes in the country. It turned out the car only had 2,400 miles on it. The car was generally perfect mechanically. I'd finally been able to get the tires on it, which was not an easy task because the center locks, which were supposed to be torqued to 400 pounds, were torqued probably past 700. They'd never been off the car. The center caps had not been removed ever, and they were over torqued, so one of them broke on the way out. I had to find another set in the Netherlands. I'd been able to get the car serviced, but that was difficult because even though I had a great expert on it, parts, everything is super tough. So the car was ready as far as I knew, but I had no idea what I was in for from a cosmetic perspective. So they show up and I see their faces and I don't understand what's wrong. They're seeing what I have now come to learn is all these scratches and, abrasion marks and evidence that the car had never really been properly cared for cosmetically. But as somebody who doesn't take care of things properly cosmetically, I didn't know that. And so I thought I was giving them just an alley-oop to a perfect car, and they realized that they did not have enough time. Watching that unfold was a little bit awkward for me because I want to make sure that the Glossit products look good. I want to protect the relationship. I want to keep everybody happy. I want them to do work that they're proud of. But I see a seriousness in everyone's eyes that I never expected to be necessary. Generally, the first thing that you would do is start to cut and polish the paint. However, we had to deal with this blemish on the nose, and there was a blend line that was really apparent, especially from certain angles. And usually, I would just PPF the car, and you wouldn't see it very much, and the next owner would never ask. But these guys wanted to do it the right way. I understand that that was the right approach. But that meant that we had to sand the car. Now, when you sand a car, you don't have any idea what's been done underneath. You don't know how significant the repair was. Is this just a hole that's been bondoed over? They could see and they started to notice that, well, it might be moving a little bit here and this might be expanding or contracting and stuff like that. And I'm hearing things that I don't know what they mean, but they are concerned. And so over the course of the first few hours, that's really where the attention goes. They do also some work to straighten a little bend in the front aluminum spoiler, which is something that you see on almost every Spyker, unfortunately, is that they run up on something or they hit something and it just isn't ever straight again. So now it's much more straight and I'm greatly appreciative of that. And now they've got to cut and polish not only that area, but especially that area to get the whole car ready for whatever is the next step. And that takes hours and hours. So this is not 1 hour to 1 hour. This meant that over the next couple of days, well over 100 man hours were going to go into making this car look as good as it could in those 2 days. And what we still didn't know is if that was going to be good enough, because another opportunity had presented itself. The Festival of Speed event in Alpharetta was just about to happen, and they'd asked if I could bring a car. This seemed perfect. This is where we will unveil Project Spyker. And so they set to work, and it's amazing because these are all things, they've got these polishers and tools and all these things that I don't have in my arsenal of ways to damage a car. And I know that these all carry risks, but I also know that their education is an ongoing process. They can learn what they need to know in the course of 90 or 120 days through Glossit University, but they're all supposed to go back and learn continually. It's like an ongoing professional education program that they retain access to through the online platform that Rich uses. And so I'm hearing them say like, oh, I've never done that. And I'm like, well, why not learn on my Spyker in my garage with inadequate lighting and tools? That seems great, right? But I don't worry about such things. How bad could it be? I hear many times, "Ooh!" And that's what happens, I suppose. And normally they don't have the customer, the owner, anywhere nearby. But ultimately, it starts to take shape. So I'm watching their progress, and I've got my expectations, and I know that Rich has his expectations or his quality threshold. And even though I saw some inexperience, I saw some people that were learning, I knew that the guardrails were in place. Rich was there as their instructor, as their mentor, and as the quality control to say, here's how you can do that better. Here's how you can do it faster. Here's how you can make better progress. And here's how you can use this product rather than this product that you reached for in order to achieve the outcome that I know you want and that we all need. And that's what was most interesting. It was really an organism organizationally that was working on the car together. And seeing all that was really, really unique. Now, I've had cars detailed by the guys at Obsessed Garage. I've had the cars detailed by the guys at Esoteric. And in general, it's so far beyond my capability that I'm in awe. But I wasn't able to watch Rich and his team work on the SLR. I've been to his shop several times. I've been able to see what they do, but never an end-to-end project, and certainly never at the pace that they were doing now. I mean, people were reluctant to take bathroom breaks because they're pouring themselves into this car, and I appreciate that, but I'm not even sure that I'm in a position to appreciate the quality of what's going on just because it's not the way I would normally approach a car. But more and more, as the car takes shape, it becomes evident that this is exactly what this car deserves. Because, Spykers were sold new next to Gallardos and 430s. But today, Spykers go to shows and get parked next to Koenigsegg's and Paganis. So it's an entirely different car now that Spyker doesn't exist anymore, and now that there's such a finite, less than 300 ever built number of them that exist, that they represent something much more significant than they ever could have dreamt of when they were new. There are so many special touches, and that meant that they had to spend so much more time on all these aluminum sections. And at the end of the day, I start to see, just after day one, my reflection in things that I didn't know could be reflective to that extent. And again, I've got great lights in the garage that the Obsessed Garage guys put in, but just seeing that as it gets dark, and I'm like, this car doesn't look like the same thing, and I thought it was nice to begin with. And so there's this refocusing of what nice is, there's this perspective and this angle into understanding what is possible with a car that was in the shape that it was, and the realization that we may actually get to a point where this car is new looking, maybe even better than new looking. And in talking to Rich, it's interesting because, I know people that are obsessive about clean cars. I know people that are worse than me about dirty cars. But we all enjoy cars in our own ways, and none of us are wrong. Now, sometimes people might mistreat a car, and that may be heresy to the automotive hobby. And I'll be honest, I was probably at risk of that with this Spyker. I mean, I would have just driven it, rain, snow, sleet, or hail, and not really worried about much. But as I started to see what the car could become, I almost started to want black cars. Now, that's a short-term irresponsibility on my own part, but I was really, really amazed. And when we pulled the car out the next morning into the sun to see what it looked like and to sort of check, because we've got good lights inside, they got flashlights are moving around, but really when you see the thing in the sunlight, that's when you know if we've done it right or if they've done it right. They didn't let me hold the stuff, and that's for everybody's better good. They were trying to teach me, and I appreciate that. I don't know how much time I'll spend on it on an ongoing basis. I like driving them, putting miles on them, and getting the dirt on them rather than getting it off. But as we started to reach the end from a goal perspective, my thought had been to clear bra the whole car, because usually that is the best way to protect it and make it more indestructible, which I like. And I never want to have a reason not to drive a car, and that is always the liability of what happens when you over-detail a car. And I say over-detail, he would say we did the right amount of stuff. But when you get a car this clean, like for instance, when I bought the CarTrek R8, the guy had driven it 60,000 miles and then not driven it for a year because he had somebody detail it to this extent, or maybe even half of this extent. And so I couldn't let that happen, but also it looked so amazing to walk around the car and see my reflection in it so clearly that it seemed irresponsible to the work that had been done to go clear bra the whole car, which would inherently make it look duller and not as clear to look through. So I'm talking to Rich, and I was like, normally we'd clear bra the car, then coat on top of it. I said, what if we just ceramic coat it? Because Rich's DIY ceramic coating is great. The one that the professionals use is greater, lasts longer, protects better. And so I was thinking all right, we probably should clear bra the front eventually, but I really don't want it to not look like this soon. And I was like, how will it look if we coat it? He's like, oh, if you like it now, if we coat this car, you're never ever gonna wanna look at anything else. So I said, do it. Fortunately, if you've got 7 people, you can ceramic coat a car in less than an hour, and that's incredible. It would have taken all day if it was just a single installer, but I see that coming together, and I'm just like, well, this was the right decision. And that's what you want to have as the outcome at the end. Like, Did we do something that was ridiculous? Did we take a really terrible car and just polish it up and make it look? No. We took a car that was really nice and we made it amazing. And that's what the car deserves as a Spyker, as something, but also as a car that I can now go and drive. Yeah, we'll PPF it at some point just to make sure that it's okay, but not the whole thing, because I don't want to lose that. In fact, there was a moment where I understood a tearful phone call that I got 3 years ago from the guy who had painted and done the finish work on my Verde Draco LP640, because I was going to drive the car home from where it was painted in Scottsdale. And this guy calls me crying after he'd had my car for 10 months and I'd have to threaten him with things to get it back because I had sent my clear bra guy out and they had, the AP3 guys, totally clear bra'd the entire car in Scottsdale 2 days before I could get there so that I could drive it home and not worry. It was that or painter's tape. But he knew that I would never see the actual quality of his work. And if it hadn't been for that phone call and then seeing the quality of Rich and his team's work on the Spyker, I would have just said, no, clear bra the car. And I'm still happy that I have clear bra'd the LP640 because I've driven it, 15,000 miles, and I know that it wouldn't look the same as it is, and I can never imagine having to match a panel on a Verde Draco car that was painted in the US. If I were on The Price is Right, and the item that we were supposed to estimate the value of was the detailing of this car, I was not prepared to even imagine. I'm sure most of our viewers are also wondering, like, what would it cost to have 100 to 150 man hours invested in cosmetically reconditioning a car? And the answer is about 10,000 bucks. And there is a lot of sticker shock there. There's a lot of sticker shock to a lot of detailing outcomes, whether it is just a clear bra or just a ceramic coating or just a proper paint correction. And when you add all of those things in, there are cars that Rich is billing out 30, 40,000 bucks on to make them nice. And that sounds crazy as a percentage of the value of most cars, most of my cars for sure. But the question is it appropriate for this car? And like I said, because of the circumstances in which I bought it and the fact that they just wanted the car gone quick, gone easy, somebody that was willing to buy it sight unseen, and that was me. I couldn't send the Lemon Squad out to PPI this car and tell me everything that was wrong with it. That wasn't going to be acceptable. I had to act quickly, I had to move fast, and I had to write them a check. And so I have margin in this car. And I didn't find a car that had been abused. I found a car that had been neglected. And when that is the reality, you do want to do right by the car and know that I may not own it forever. I think it's a car that I could own forever. I could drive another 50,000 miles and really, really enjoy. But I don't have a good track record of doing that, I'll be honest. And so while I'm certainly not trying to sell it, I did tease Sylvester Stallone's people with some really, really pretty pictures of it in the last few hours. I know that we made the right decision here because it's a $500,000 car. And it deserves to look as good as it does. It deserves to stay looking that way, perhaps more than I'll be able to achieve. But I do know that there's a durability to the outcome and that it is going to continue to look great. And I'm excited for it to continue to look great. And at the end of the day, I knew that we had done the right thing for the car. And that right thing was trusting somebody who knew a lot more about it than I do. Rich is an expert in the industry, and he knew that it was really up to him to tell me how far to go with the car, but it became easier and easier to take that next step and make that next decision and know that the money was well spent. And so I feel entirely differently about the prospect of what a handoff of this car might look like if I do go to sell it, because I'm not going to sit there knowing that they're probably going to get a little disappointed in the condition of this car, because that's how I've always felt. Whenever I sell a car, I've done as well as I feel like makes sense, but given its history and given its issues and given whatever is wrong, I'm just saying, look, here's the car. It's as is. I told you it's as is. Enjoy it that way. I've never sold a nice car. I mean, not that was mine. I sold plenty of nice cars at the dealership. And of course, everything that is evident in the video looks really good, but that's in whatever resolution your browser is downloading in right now. The real litmus test was putting this car in public. And so the next day we went out to Festival of Speed at Avalon, and holy cow, the car stole the show. And The car would always steal the show because it's a Spyker. It was going to be the only one. There's only 2 registered in Georgia, and Akon wasn't going to bring his. And so I had it out there in the company of some truly phenomenal cars, and the crowd around the car was unreal. That's exactly what anybody wants when they take their car to an event like that. But what I would say is to anybody who wants to put the best foot forward with a car, to put the car into the best shape that it can be, honestly, regardless of what your starting point is, find someone in your area that is properly trained, has the right equipment, and is willing to spend the time that the car needs, that the car deserves, to achieve an outcome like this. And the best way to do that is to call Rich in Vegas and say, who did you teach in my city to do what you do? Or should I ship my car to you in Vegas and let you guys do it yourselves? Premier Financial Services makes it easier and more affordable than you could possibly imagine to own your dream car. Their Simple Lease is one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits like the tax savings and the low payments of a lease with all the additional benefits that you normally find in a traditional finance arrangement. You can build up equity, you can pay it off early, you can trade in and out of cars because you get a very clear and easy to understand amortization table to understand what your payoff will be any month throughout your term. And all the while, the amazing team from Premier Financial Services will be right there to help you along the way. They've been supporters of the VINwiki channel now for 5 years in a row, so we can't thank them enough for that, but mostly we're thankful for the fact that they can help you make it easier than ever to own your dream car. Check them out now.